Imagine walking through a dense tropical forest at dusk. The air is thick with mist. The calls of unseen birds echo through the canopy, and the shadows play tricks on your mind. Suddenly, in the corner of your vision, you catch sight of something small, human-like, but not quite human. Wide eyes glint in the fading light. A slender body moves quickly and silently between the trees. And so just a heartbeat, you wonder, was that really a person? Or something else entirely? Now picture this. What if that figure was Homo Floresiensis, the so-called Hobbit of human evolution? Not just a relic of the past, but a living species that had somehow survived until today. This is not mere fantasy. In 2003, archaeologists on the Indonesian island of Flores uncovered something astonishing: the remains of a tiny species of human, standing just over a meter tall, with a brain no larger than that of a chimpanzee. Yet, despite their size, these prehistoric humans crafted tools, hunted, and thrived on their island for tens of thousands of years. They lived at the same time as our own species, Homo sapiens, and then, at least as far as we know, they vanished. But what if they didn't? What if Homo floresiensis had endured hidden deep in the forests and caves of Southeast Asia, surviving storms, volcanic eruptions, and the spread of modern humanity? How would the world look if we were not the only humans on this planet? What would it mean for our history, our culture, our sense of uniqueness? Tonight, we will embark on a journey through time, science, and imagination. We will uncover the discovery of the Hobbit people, explore the debate surrounding their existence, and dare to ask the forbidden question: what if they had never disappeared? This is more than an archaeological mystery. It is a mirror held up to humanity itself. Every fossil, every fragment of bone tells us that the world we inherited was not always ours alone. Once the Earth echoed with the footsteps of many human cousins: Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and now the enigmatic Floresiensis in Indonesia. Each of these lost civilizations of prehistoric humans reveals how fragile our dominance truly was, and how easily history could have taken another path. Consider this: if Homo floresiensis were alive today, we would not just be sharing the Earth with gorillas or chimpanzees, we would be sharing it with another human, a people with language, with culture, with myths and ways of life utterly unlike our own. Would we see them as equals, as curiosities, or, as history too often shows, as threats? And then there are the whispered tales. Local legends on Flores speak of the Ibu Gogo, small wild people who lived in caves, stole food, and mimicked human speech. Could these stories be fading memories of an ancient encounter between modern humans and the last surviving hobbits? Could folklore be hiding a truth that science has yet to prove? The question before us is both simple and immense. What if Homo floresiensis had survived until today? In this video, we will uncover the science, confront the mysteries, and imagine the alternate world where we are not alone.
The story of Homo floresiensis begins, as many great archaeological discoveries do, with a cave. In 2003, on the Indonesian island of Flores, researchers exploring Liang Bua cave stumbled upon something that would shake the foundations of human evolution. Beneath layers of sediment, they uncovered the partial skeleton of a being unlike anything they had ever seen. She was tiny, barely 1.06 meters tall, just over 3 feet. Her skull was small, holding a brain no bigger than a grapefruit, yet her skeleton was unmistakably human. The team nicknamed her LB1, or the Hobbit, after the fictional creatures in J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium. But this was no fantasy. This was a flesh and blood species of human that had once walked the earth. The initial shock was immense. For decades, scientists believed that the human story followed a fairly linear path, from ancient ancestors in Africa through Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. But here, in this hidden corner of Southeast Asia, was proof that the truth was far more complex. This wasn't just another chapter, it was an entirely different book. The Hobbit's place in human evolution. The remains from Liang Bua were dated to around 60,000 to 100,000 years ago. That means Homo Floresiensis lived at the same time as Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and modern humans spreading across the globe. What makes this discovery even more intriguing is the mystery of their origins. How did these tiny humans end up on a remote island in Indonesia? One theory suggests they descended from Homo erectus, the first great traveler of our lineage, who left Africa nearly 2 million years ago. Over time, trapped on an island with limited resources, they shrank in size, a process known as insular dwarfism, common among island species. Just as elephants on Flores evolved into miniature forms, so too did humans. But other scientists propose something even stranger, that Homo floresiensis could be a remnant of a much more ancient human lineage, perhaps closer to the very root of our genus. If true, it would mean that while modern humans were building civilizations, one of our most distant cousins was still clinging to life on a faraway island. Archaeological treasures of Liang Bua. The Liang Bua cave yielded more than just bones. Archaeologists also discovered stone tools, flakes, blades, and points scattered around the site. These were not crude accidents of nature. They were carefully made, showing skill and intent. There were also animal remains, the bones of giant storks, Komodo dragons, and most famously, the stegodon, a dwarf elephant species that once roamed Flores. The evidence suggested that the hobbits hunted, butchered, and feasted on these animals. Imagine the scene, a group of small-bodied humans working together to take down a creature several times their size. Against all odds, they survived and thrived. This was not simply a species surviving on scraps. This was a people with fire, tools, and strategy. They were more than shadows of humanity. They were human in their own unique way. The controversy. Of course, such a discovery could not escape controversy. From the very beginning, some scientists refused to believe that Homo floresiensis was a distinct species. They argued that LB1 might simply have been a diseased or deformed modern human, perhaps one with microcephaly, a condition that causes small brains. Others suggested Down syndrome or dwarfism. But further finds from Liang Bua and other sites changed the debate. Additional skeletal remains revealed consistent features, unusual proportions of arms and legs, a differently shaped skull, and primitive traits more in line with Homo erectus than modern humans. The evidence grew too strong to dismiss. The Hobbit, it seemed, was real. And so, reluctantly at first, the scientific community began to accept that the human family tree was not a simple trunk, but a dense, tangled forest. Echoes in local legends. Even before archaeologists arrived, the people of Flores had their own stories. They spoke of the Ibu Gogo, small wild folk who lived in caves, had potbellies, long hair, and spoke in murmurs. According to legend, they were mischievous, stealing food and sometimes even children. The tales said that the Ibu Gogo were eventually driven out or exterminated by the islanders, but not before leaving behind a trace of unease, as though they might return. When news of the Hobbit discovery broke, many locals were not surprised. To them, science was finally catching up with folklore. Could it be that these stories are cultural memories, echoes passed down for centuries of interactions between modern humans and the last surviving Homo floresiensis? The importance of the discovery. The implications of Liang Bua are staggering. It forces us to rethink what it means to be human. For centuries, our species has seen itself as unique, set apart from all other creatures by intelligence, culture, and creativity. But the hobbits remind us that we were not alone. Imagine the world 50,000 years ago. On one continent, modern humans spreading like wildfire. In Europe, Neanderthals still standing strong. In Siberia, Denisovans hidden in caves. And in the islands of Indonesia, tiny hobbits carving tools and roasting elephant meat over fires. The Earth was a crowded place, full of human diversity. And here lies the central mystery. Why did we survive and they did not? Was it chance? Was it climate change? Or was it us, modern humans, whose spread and dominance extinguished all others? The question still lingers, unanswered, in the bones of Liang Bua, and it leads us to an even deeper one. If Homo floresiensis had managed to hold on, hidden in the forests of Flores, how would that change the story of humanity today?
So now let us imagine. Let us step beyond the fossilized bones in a cave, beyond the stone tools lying in the dust, and ask the most haunting question of all. What if Homo floresiensis had survived until today? To explore this possibility, we must first look at how these small humans might have lived, both in their own time and in ours. A day in the life of the Hobbits. Picture the tropical forests of Flores, tens of thousands of years ago. Towering trees form a green ceiling, vines coil like serpents, and the ground is alive with the rustling of unseen creatures. Among the shadows move small figures, agile and cautious. Barefoot, they step lightly, leaving little trace. Their eyes are large, attuned to the dim forest light. In their hands, sharp stone tools glint. They are hunters and gatherers, but their prey is unusual. Instead of mammoths or bison, they track dwarf elephants, stegodons, no larger than a cow, yet still formidable. A group of hobbits surrounds the animal, their voices rising in sharp cries. With teamwork, patience, and perhaps fire to drive it into confusion, they bring it down. Later, they sit by the flames, roasting meat, chipping stones into new blades, and sharing the day's stories. Though their brains are small compared to ours, their world is rich with knowledge. Knowledge born not of size, but of necessity, adaptation, and memory. Survival into the modern age. Now imagine that some of them did not vanish. Perhaps small populations endured in remote valleys, in caves untouched by modern eyes, surviving through secrecy and skill. The forests of Indonesia are vast and dense. Even today, entire species are discovered hidden within them. Why not the hobbits? If they survived, how might they have adapted to the modern world? Would they still live as hunter and gatherers, using fire and stone tools in the shadows of civilization? Or would contact with humans have drawn them slowly into our orbit, learning our ways, borrowing our tools, even speaking fragments of our languages? It's possible that they would remain elusive, like cryptids whispered of but rarely seen. The Ebu Gogo legends might not just be tales of the past, but warnings of present encounters. In the darkest forests, a family of hobbits might still move at night, avoiding roads, stealing food, and fading into myth whenever threatened. But how would we see them? But if such a discovery were made public, if living Homo floresiensis were found and proven, our world would never be the same. Think of it, a second species of human alive today. Not just apes, not just animals we can easily categorize, but humans, with hands, with faces, with laughter, with fear. Would we call them people? Would we grant them rights? Or would we study them in cages, turning them into living fossils? History gives us reasons to be cautious. For centuries, colonial explorers treated indigenous peoples as curiosities, exploiting them, stripping away their dignity. If hobbits appeared today, would we repeat these mistakes? Or would we finally embrace the humility that comes with realizing we are not alone? A mirror to ourselves. The survival of Homo floresiensis would force us to confront what it means to be human. For too long, we have defined ourselves by our uniqueness, by the idea that we are the only species capable of language, art, and culture. But if another species of human walked among us, those lines would blur.
Would their myths be recorded in books? Would their songs echo in music halls? Would their wisdom about forests and survival enrich our knowledge? Or would it be dismissed as primitive? In a way, the hobbits are a mirror. Their survival would not just reveal them, it would reveal us. It would show us whether humanity is capable of compassion and respect, or whether we are doomed to dominate and destroy whatever is different. The biological puzzle. From a scientific perspective, the existence of living hobbits would open doors that have been locked for tens of thousands of years. Geneticists would seek their DNA, not only to confirm their lineage, but to uncover secrets of human evolution. Would their genes reveal adaptations to tropical forests that we lack? Would they carry immunity to diseases unknown to us? Could they even hold medical treasures, keys to understanding brain development, growth, or resilience against harsh climates? And then there is the haunting possibility. What if their DNA mingled with ours? We know that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. If hobbits survived, would we discover traces of them hidden in our bloodlines? Could some people today unknowingly carry fragments of hobbit heritage? A collision of worlds. But beyond science lies the social reality. Imagine the first headline: "New species of human found alive in Indonesia." Cameras would descend, governments would stake claims, and corporations would smell profit. Tourism would surge, conservation battles would ignite, and religious debates would flare across the globe. Some might see the hobbits as divine proof of creation, others as a challenge to long-held beliefs. Some might demand protection of their lands, while others might demand access to their secrets. The hobbits themselves, if they still lived as a people, would face the ultimate choice: remain hidden or step into a world that might not be ready to accept them. Echoes of the past. And yet, perhaps this scenario is not as far-fetched as it seems. Consider this. When European explorers first encountered pygmy groups in Africa or indigenous tribes in the Amazon, they often dismissed them as relics of an earlier age. To the outsiders, these communities were a glimpse into humanity's past, but in truth, they were and are fully modern people, adapting in their own ways. If hobbits survived, they too might not be the primitive beings we expect. They might surprise us with skills, languages, and traditions that show a complexity we never imagined. Perhaps the true tragedy is not that they vanished, but that we assume they could not survive. The world has a way of hiding its secrets. Could Homo Floresiensis be one of them? The thought lingers like a shadow, that somewhere, in the vast green heart of Indonesia, another kind of human might still walk. Not an ape, not a myth, but a cousin, a people with their own story.
The idea of Homo Floresiensis surviving into the present day is both thrilling and unsettling. It invites us to examine not only science, but also myth, controversy, and the fragile boundaries of what we call human. In this part, we will dive deeper into debates, disagreements, and unanswered questions. Because where certainty fades, mystery takes its place. The scientific divide. Since their discovery, the hobbits have stood at the center of fiery debates. Were they truly a separate species, or simply an unusual group of modern humans? On one side, scholars like Peter Brown and Mike Morwood, part of the original discovery team, argued passionately that the skeletal evidence pointed to a distinct species. The shape of the skull, the proportions of the arms and legs, the structure of the wrist bones, all these features seemed too primitive, too different from Homo sapiens. On the other side, skeptics suggested pathology. Could LB1 have been a modern human with microcephaly, a condition that reduces brain size? Or perhaps she suffered from Laron syndrome, a rare form of dwarfism. Critics pointed out that brains as small as LB1's should not be able to produce the sophisticated stone tools found at Liang Bua. Yet, as more fossils emerged, the pathology argument weakened. Multiple individuals shared the same unusual traits. The hobbits were not an anomaly. They were a population. Still, the debate lingers, echoing through anthropology like a half-forgotten song. And that uncertainty creates space for one haunting possibility. What if we haven't found them all? The mystery of survival. One of the most shocking revelations from Liang Bua was the dating of the fossils. Initially, scientists believed the hobbits lived until 12,000 years ago, practically yesterday in evolutionary terms. Later studies pushed that date back to around 50,000 years ago, but still, this was the same period when modern humans had already reached Australia and were spreading across Southeast Asia. That overlap raises a tantalizing question. Did our ancestors ever encounter them? Consider this. Homo sapiens did not just coexist with Neanderthals and Denisovans, they interbred with them. Genetic evidence proves that many people alive today carry Neanderthal DNA, and some carry Denisovan DNA as well. Could the same be true of Homo Floresiensis, and we simply haven't found the genetic trail yet? Or perhaps contact was brief and violent. If modern humans arrived on Flores bringing fire, weapons, and numbers, the hobbits may have stood little chance. And yet, folklore whispers that they lingered. Folklore as evidence. We must return to the tales of the Ebu Gogo. In the local Naje language, this name means the grandmother who eats everything. The stories describe small, hairy people with large mouths and awkward speech. They were said to steal food, imitate human voices, and sometimes kidnap children. According to legend, the islanders grew so fearful that they trapped the Ebu Gogo in a cave and burned them alive. To many scientists, these are nothing more than myths, stories invented to explain the strange. But myths often have roots in reality. Could it be that these stories preserve distant memories of encounters with Homo Floresiensis? If so, the hobbits may have survived far longer than bones alone suggest. Some locals even claim that sightings persisted into recent centuries. If that is true, then survival into the present becomes less of a fantasy and more of a hidden possibility. A clash of perspectives. But imagine the consequences of such a discovery today. Anthropologists would celebrate, calling it the find of the millennium. Geneticists would rush to sequence Hobbit DNA, museums would scramble to secure remains, while governments would fight over ownership. And yet, indigenous communities on Flores might view things differently. For them, the hobbits would not be specimens, but ancestral spirits, beings tied to land and legend. What science calls Homo Floresiensis, they might call family. This clash between Western science and indigenous tradition is not new. It happened with Native American remains, with Australian Aboriginal ancestors, with countless archaeological discoveries. If hobbits walked among us today, whose story would we tell? The scientific or the cultural? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. The ethical dilemma. Let us ask the hardest question. If Homo Floresiensis survived, how would we treat them? Would they be granted the same human rights as us? Would they be considered citizens, allowed to vote, marry, and own land? Or would they be treated as specimens, preserved for study like endangered animals? History suggests a grim answer. When European powers encountered small, isolated human groups, such as the indigenous peoples of Tasmania, they did not preserve them, they destroyed them. Colonial violence erased entire cultures in the name of progress. Would the hobbits suffer the same fate? And yet, perhaps we have learned. Perhaps the hobbits, if alive today, would spark a new age of respect for human diversity, a recognition that human is not one face, but many. Unanswered questions. Even as we imagine survival, mysteries remain. Language. Did Homo Floresiensis speak? Could they communicate in complex ways, or was their speech limited to simple sounds? If alive today, would we be able to share stories with them, or would they remain forever voiceless? Culture. Did they have rituals, songs, myths, or was their world entirely practical? Tools, fire, food, survival. Intelligence. How far could a brain one-third the size of ours truly go? The tools at Liang Bua suggest remarkable adaptability, but was it instinct or was it thought?
We do not know. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery. The Hobbits force us to confront the limits of our knowledge. They remind us that archaeology is not just about bones, it's about the ghosts of possibility. The shadow of lost worlds. When we study the Hobbits, we are not just studying a species. We are studying a path not taken. What if the Hobbits had expanded beyond Flores? What if they had developed agriculture, built villages, carved statues? Would there now be Hobbit nations, Hobbit religions, Hobbit philosophies? Would we live in a world with parallel civilizations, giant humans and little humans, side by side? This thought lingers like a haunting dream, that our world could have been shared, not conquered. That humanity could have been plural, not singular. That somewhere in history, a different branch of the tree might still be growing. And so, as we imagine their survival, we face not just the possibility of another species, but the possibility of another future. A future that never was, or perhaps one that still could be.
Up to this point, we have wandered through caves, uncovered bones, and imagined alternate histories. But archaeology is never just about the past. Every discovery, every fossil, every myth forces us to reflect on the present and on ourselves. The question of Homo Floresiensis is not simply, did they survive? It is also, what does their story teach us today? Lesson 1. Fragility of survival. The Hobbits remind us that survival is never guaranteed. They lived for hundreds of thousands of years on a small island, adapting to volcanic eruptions, fierce predators, and limited resources. Yet, in the end, they vanished. Why? Perhaps it was the arrival of modern humans. Perhaps it was a changing climate. Perhaps it was pure chance. Whatever the cause, their disappearance is a warning. Dominance is temporary. Even the most resilient species can fall. Today, as we face climate change, pandemics, and the threat of ecological collapse, we must ask ourselves, are we any safer than the Hobbits? Their story is not just about prehistory, it is about us, here and now. If they could vanish, so can we. Lesson 2. Humility in human evolution. For centuries, humanity has told itself a simple story. We are unique, we are special, we are the pinnacle of evolution. But discoveries like Homo Floresiensis shatter that illusion. Imagine a family tree, not with one proud trunk, but with many branches, some cut off, others bending in unexpected directions. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Hobbits, all were humans in their own right, and for most of history, we were just one of many. This should humble us. We are not inevitable, we are not chosen, we are simply the branch that happened to survive. And survival does not mean superiority. It means luck, adaptability, and timing. Lesson 3. Diversity as strength. If hobbits had survived into the modern age, the world would be unimaginably richer, not just scientifically, but culturally. We would see humanity in many forms, not one. Think of the debates about diversity today, cultural, ethnic, linguistic. Imagine how much deeper they would be if we had an entirely different human species to learn from. Their way of understanding the forest, their relationship with animals, their myths and stories. These could challenge our assumptions and expand our vision of what it means to be human. Instead, we live in a world where those possibilities were cut short. And perhaps that is our greatest loss, not just the hobbits themselves, but the alternate wisdom they might have offered. Lesson 4. Respect for the unknown. The tale of Homo Floresiensis also teaches us to respect the unknown. For decades, scientists dismissed the idea that other humans could have survived so recently. Yet, the fossils prove them wrong. How many other secrets lie hidden in caves, in forests, in the deep ocean?
How many mysteries have we ignored because they did not fit our assumptions? The Hobbits remind us that the universe is larger and stranger than we imagine, and that humility, the ability to admit we do not know, is perhaps the most important lesson of all. In our modern world, driven by technology and certainty, this lesson matters. It tells us, do not dismiss what seems impossible. Do not ignore myths and legends. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones closest to truth. Lesson 5. How we treat the other.
So what if Homo Floresiensis had survived until today? Would we walk alongside them as equals, learning from their resilience and respecting their differences? Or would we repeat the darker patterns of our past, dominating, exploiting, erasing? The answer to that question reveals far more about us than it does about them. The Hobbits of Flores are more than a scientific curiosity. They are a reminder that the story of humanity is not linear, but tangled. For most of prehistory, we were not alone. Neanderthals carved tools in the caves of Europe. Denisovans thrived in the mountains of Asia. And on a small island in Indonesia, the Hobbits lived out their quiet saga, hunting elephants and kindling fire. Each of these species was a world unto itself. Each carried knowledge, culture, and a way of being human that we will never fully grasp. Their disappearance is not just the loss of individuals, it is the loss of entire perspectives, entire possibilities. And yet, their bones, their tools, their myths whisper to us across time. You were never alone. You were never the only one. If the Hobbits had survived, our world would be unimaginably different. Our definition of humanity would expand. Our sense of uniqueness would vanish. And perhaps our arrogance would soften. We would live in a world where human was not one face, but many. A world where diversity was not just cultural, but biological. But even though they're gone, or hidden, the lessons remain. The fragility of survival, the need for humility, the value of diversity, the respect owed to the unknown. These lessons are not fossils. They are alive, if we choose to carry them. So tonight, as you step away from this story, ask yourself, what does it mean to be human? Is it brain size, technology, culture, or is it something deeper? Our ability to imagine, to connect, to wonder. And perhaps the final question, do we really know everything about our ancestors? Or are there still shadows in the forest, still whispers in the caves, still cousins waiting to be found? The Hobbits may be gone. Or maybe, just maybe, their story is not finished. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of prehistory, into human evolution, archaeology, and the lost civilizations of our ancient world, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for the next exploration. Because the past still holds secrets, and together we will uncover them.